Bermuda's architecture is not just a collection of buildings, it's a living reflection of the island's history, culture, and the innovative spirit of its people. From the iconic white roofs of Bermuda cottages to the modern designs that look towards the future, the architecture here is a testament to both tradition and progress. It is a unique blend of sustainability, craftsmanship, and resilience shaped by the land and the people who call this island home.
My name is Mikale Willis, and I am an S4 student at the Berkeley Institute. I am currently enrolled in the Preserve Our Heritage class taught by Mrs. Steele, and my task is to film a documentary that dives deep into Bermuda's architectural landscape.
This documentary will dive into the island's historical roots and its dynamic future. We will hear from a diverse group of individuals, from aspiring architects to experts in water systems and heritage preservation, who are working to shape the island's architectural identity. Through their stories and insights, we'll see how Bermuda's past informs its present and guides its future, with an emphasis on sustainability, innovation, and cultural preservation.
Before we dive deep into the history and traditions of Bermuda's architecture, I want to start with a fresh perspective. My good friend Justin Welch is an aspiring architect whose passion for design and innovation reflects the hope and potential of Bermuda's future. Let's hear how his vision blends our island's heritage with modern aspirations.
Hello, I am Justin Welch. His first question was, why did I decide to pursue architecture as a career? The thing that inspired me to be an architect in the future is mainly my love of drawing. My entire life I've enjoyed drawing and expressing myself through art. And I found that through architecture, I could take that love and turn it into something that can help other people. Along with my love of Minecraft, but we're not gonna get into that. Personally, I love Bermuda's architecture style. I love our white limestone roofs mainly because they make us unique, make us uniquely Bermudian. But however, I have noticed that there is a major divide between the younger and older generations. The younger generations don't so much care about tradition, but the older generations are all about tradition, and because there's a disconnect between those two, our architecture and our modern, island design suffers because of that. On the topic of Bermuda's natural disasters, I think personally our homes and our architectural style is very clued in on natural disasters. Our houses are built to withstand them. There is not much actual property damage, destruction when storms happen. But I think when it comes to our limited resources, limited space, a good aspect we could use is start making more multi-purpose buildings or repurposing buildings to have more than one function, because that way we can maximize our space while minimizing the resources it takes.
As we have just heard from Justin, it is very exciting to see where Bermuda's architecture will go in the future. Now, let's turn our focus to the past and explore how the distinctive features of Bermuda cottages and roofs discussed by Colin Campbell will continue to shape our agriculture identity today. I am here with Mr. Colin Campbell. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Colin Campbell. I'm Bermudian. I went to school at Whitney. I went to school at Mount Agnes. I then went to school in the United States, in the state of Nebraska, and then finally out in California. Came back to Bermuda to study architecture, or to do architecture, in 1984. And for the last 40 years, I've been doing architecture in Bermuda and other places around the world as well.
Question 1. How do Bermuda's roofs and cottages reflect the island's cultural and historical identity?
Architecture is as much a question of the use of materials, geography, environment, and understanding of simple geometry. Bermuda is no different. The folks who came to Bermuda in 1612 to start establishing the colony, they brought with them the native understanding of the world as from which they came from, which was the south coast of England. And they also brought the tools and the technology that they understood. What they found here in Bermuda was a very interesting environment, which wasn't too cold and wasn't too hot. In fact, it's quite modest. It's only about a 20-degree temperature range, but slightly higher humidity range. And the initial houses that were built were made of wood frames and infilled with a plaster stucco called a sort of a wattle, using leaves and branches, and back it with a mud and sand mix. It made a very hard, almost cementitious finish. And as a consequence, those houses stood quite well for almost 100 years. The roofs themselves, though, curiously, evolved from very simple flat shed roofs to more complex pitched roofs. And those pitched roofs were based on the use of Bermuda cedar, found materials, and the roofs generally had a very higher pitch than what we have even today. And that was due to the fact that the timber that made the roofs was very valuable. Cedar for making furniture making and shipbuilding and the like. So they used the lesser quality timbers or branches of trees to form the roof. And its consequence, the roofs were pitched a little bit higher in order to make the shape of the roof, the triangular shape of the roof, get the weight down onto the wall a lot faster, quicker. A couple, three things that came out of that. The roofs were also initially covered with palm trees, palmetto thatch and the like, which were used to the south coast of England. But then because of the tobacco industry, they needed to capture the heat inside the housing. So a more complete roof was required. And almost in the first 100 years of Bermuda's colonization, there was also stone excavation and the making of forts started to educate people on the use of stone and slate and all that.
Question 2. How do Bermuda roofs contribute to sustainable living, particularly in terms of water collection and energy efficiency?
So Bermuda roofs act as a really interesting, many-faceted device. First of all, they keep the rain off your head. They collect the water. And then also they resist the natural forces in a hurricane event that would either pull it apart. The use of the slate and then the lime finish was also very fortuitous. It was made for an easy way to seal the roof to stop it from leaking. But as it turned out, it was also because of the alkalis, it also acted to purify the water that was being caught in it. So it was very, again, it's not that the early Bermudians understood that chemistry. It was happenstance, and by dint of just habit and success, they stayed with it and off you go. It's only later that we've subsequently found this out.
How have modern technologies influenced the construction and upkeep of Bermuda cottages and roofs?
Bermuda, and like every other place in the world, will survive well enough on its own resources, and then it will mimic those resources for a while once the natural resources run out. By about the mid-60s, early 70s, the Bermuda stone quarries were starting to be tapped out. I think the last quarry, one of the last active quarries, commercial quarries, is in Smith's Parish, not far from the Barrett's location. And there's one or two other people who are quarrying their properties. Concrete block came into fashion in the 1950s. That was a big change, real big change. Will Onions was offered the opportunity to build City Hall, for example, out of concrete block or Bermuda stone. And yet he averred to Bermuda stone, feeling that it was a much more traditional material and stayed with what he knew type of thing. One of the biggest changes in Bermuda, of course, was indoor plumbing. Boy, who knew? Right up to the 1950s, people were still building outhouses. You know, it sounds crazy, but that's where it was. And all things being equal, as long as they're properly maintained, they can be a very sanitary, very safe way of managing human waste. So plumbing, indoor plumbing, electricity came in the late 1900s, very slowly. In 1950 or 1960s, certainly, you have garages started coming in, a special place to keep your car. The use of glass, of course, has changed. Glass was very, very expensive, almost impossible in the early days of Bermuda, because transporting glass on a sailing ship, you generally got a lot of cracked glass on the other end of the trip. So it's not until more modern times that we've got windows, and the windows have improved immensely, and now we're double glazed, and they do all sorts of wonderful things. When I was coming up in the early 60s, people were outraged when people put TV antennas on their chimneys so they can get TV, because it was not in the Bermuda look, don't you know? And it was quite the thing. And then, of course, in the mid-'80s, it was satellite dishes. And all that now has disappeared because, as you know, it's all internet and Wi-Fi and all that. But it's interesting how technology has had an effect on the look and feel of a Bermuda roof. The most important thing to happen right now in terms of Bermuda roof has to be solar panels. Now, Solar panels are critical for a number of good reasons. It gives you a source of energy for the day and the night if you have sufficient panels and a battery backup. All these things add up in terms of how we are going to succeed as a little island in the middle of the great blue sea, in the patterns in which we've become accustomed, with the culture that we continue to absorb and grow and evolve, and see how this works. I personally think our architecture is pretty robust to manage some of the wild changes that are going to come down the pike, but we shouldn't sit back fat and happy. We should be conscious, aware, and we should be installing to other nations, other places who live on more marginal areas to look at the Bermuda roof, look at the water tanks, look at the scalability of what we're building, and make those structures happier places for other people elsewhere. And that's how Bermuda culture can expand out into the world.
Okay, thank you very much for all of the information that you shared with us, shared with me today. Thank you. Once again, I want to say thank you to Mr. Campbell for coming onto Zoom and having that interview with me. We did go over time. The full interview was about 30 minutes. So what I have gone ahead and done is upload the video separately as an unlisted video onto my YouTube channel. To watch the full interview, go down into the video's description, press the link, and it will take you directly to that if you would like to see the entire interview. Now, moving forward, we have a very special guest to me. We have my grandpa, Brian Willis, who will be going into Bermuda water tanks and cesspits.
Good day. My name is Brian Willis. I am Mikale's grandfather, and he's asked me to do something about Bermuda water tanks. Bermuda water tanks are underneath the house, and we collect our water off our Bermuda roofs, which is a slate roof painted white. It runs into the tank, and we can use that for washing, shower, everything in the house, wash machine, what have you. It's clean water because the paint we put on the roof is, I don't know the proper name of it, but it purifies the water. And our tanks do have to be cleaned every 4 or 5 years. It's cleaned out because we do get a few leaves and what have you in the tank. And the other thing was being my house, this old house, it has a small tank, so I invested in a well. I had a well put in. It's about 125 feet down. Back about 25 years ago, it cost approximately $1,700, which was a good price then. Anyway, the water in my tank is fairly pure. I pump it up. It pumps up 125 feet to a pressure tank in my garage, which I can supply all the bathrooms, the toilets, and washing machine, and for watering the garden and grass and washing the car. We do have to get it checked every so many years. You know, all these years I have put 3 new pumps in, which I think was good. And that's that. Now, the other thing is we have a pit, what we call a cesspit, which all the leftovers from the kitchen sink to the bathrooms goes into this cesspit, which is like a square block, big block, maybe 8 by 8. It does have holes in it which the water seeps out. It's about 3 feet underneath the ground, and the water just seeps out of it and into the ground. It doesn't make any harm. It doesn't hurt a well pump because my well pump's 125 feet down. You have all the Bermuda stone to go through the lime rock, which will filter it out most probably. And that's all I can think of right now.
As we have just learned what Bermudian water tanks are, Bermudian cesspits, and Bermudian wells, we are going to turn our attention over to Mr. Brad Woodings, who's going to share his journey on preserving and restoring Bermuda's historical structures. Mr. Woodings is going to share his journey on renovating a derelict cottage while balancing modern needs with historical integrity.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm a leader actually with the Scout Association Bermuda, and been involved with a few construction and renovation projects in Bermuda. But I think what we're going to talk about today is a challenge that we've come upon for the Scout Association here, is a cottage that we've just signed a lease for on Coney Island. It is a cottage that is approximately from the early 1800s. And for some of you little history buffs and the like, here goes a fun one. It was the caretaker's cottage for the horses, for the ferry reach.
The first question is, what makes renovating old cottages in Bermuda so tricky, and how do you resolve these challenges?
Patience.
Patience.
That's the main word, patience.
Okay.
Because at the same time, you think it should be pretty darn easy to do. Well, it's not. What we've done, and it actually took approximately 2.5 years, was research. Going back and asking the appropriate authorities and the like here locally, what was some of the history of the place? What is it? What challenges do we have? Was it listed? Meaning there's 3 sets of listings with government in regards to protected buildings. So it's grade 1, 2, and 3. Well, lucky our little cottage is a grade 3 one. There's a very old Bermuda stone cottage, very thick walls, that also has a framework that supports the roof that is Bermuda cedar, but has been taken and reinforced with an old set of timbers that were from an old lumberyard that used to be down on Front Street. And we're currently looking at that superstructure to see what we need to fix that. So yes, some of the real tricky stuff is again, finding out the history, researching it, and seeing how far and what you can do with each one. And at times, although there's stuff in writing for all different types of agencies, you can then go to one agency, such as we did for National Trust, and found out, oh, they would suggest, yes, they wouldn't have any reserves or any questions about what we do, but they would really like to have a certain paint colors on it. So we said, fine, we have no problem with paint colors.
Okay.
So they helped us with research. They helped us with finding some old photos from prints of old plate photos that was in a library collection in Chicago. Interesting. So we found out a lot of history about it. At the same time, we've gone with the trust and said, hey, can we have a bit of that history and one of those old photos, and can we post it inside the cottage after we finish, so when others come, they can get an idea what the history was and what we started with. So yes, finding out things that were done and not done to the cottage, the additions that were put on, the changing in regulations that have been done over periods of time. You'll find on some of the old architecture that was here, they used to bring in these big square iron tanks and put them on the back of the houses. And those were used for, you pumped your water up to them, and that's how you got your water pressure and your hot water into your house. Nothing like we got up today.
Okay, so number 2, how do you incorporate old materials like cedar and limestone when restoring historic homes?
That is, again, there's no lime kilns. That's another one everybody can research. Do they remember what lime kilns were, what they were used for here? Well, we try to do different things and incorporate what we're going to have to do to bring stuff back to the structure and the superstructure for the roof using cedar and or the closest timbers we can to do some reinforcing work. But otherwise, limestone and stone, we're going to use a bit of it in certain places, but we're just going to use standard modern materials for turning around and replastering the walls and fixing them. Again, it's code requirements. We have to put in PVC pipe now for all the plumbing. We have to put in all these shielded cables and the like. It used to be back then, if anybody knows what porcelain post is for electricity, it used to be these porcelain posts that they nailed to the timbers and they ran the wires, the 2 wires going along. Dangerous as heck at any time now, but you have to use modern materials and blend it in, but to try to put them in place so that they're not too obtrusive.
Okay, and number 3, do you combine new and old styles in your renovations? And if so, how do you make that blend work effectively? So like for Coney Island, for an example, with the new Scout HQ that we're currently renovating, are you blending like new and old styles to make that cottage or to renovate the cottage?
Yeah, we are. We're blending some styles on how we do the bathrooms.
Okay.
But we also, at the same time, we have to ensure that one of the bathrooms is handicap accessible.
Okay.
Which makes in certain requirements on the turnaround for a wheelchair, the height of all the fixtures, the types of the fixtures, and things like that. So there is the blending of what we're going to do with some of the look of the old tiles that we're going to put on the walls and things like that, but we have to put the modern fixtures in. We have to put in modern stainless steel handrails for the things like you've seen and the like, but we have to blend some of those things in. Some older homes and the like, some people can do that if they don't have to, if it's on personal homes, but because this is a semi-commercial, and they call it actually a public assembly, we have to do certain things. Things like we're going to do for the fire alarm. Back then, they didn't have fire alarms. They didn't have anything. But we're going to put a fire alarm up, but the cabling and the like, we're going to hide it and or paint it brown so it doesn't show. We're going to blend things where we're going to do our doors. Your standard style doors and things you have now, they could be flat panel, they could be all the glazing and glass and all kinds of things like that. But what we're going to do, and we agreed this with the National Trust and a few of the other agencies, we're actually going to use a fire-rated recycled plastic wood with a wood grain that looks like cedar.
Okay.
But it's tongue and groove. So the old style doors, if you used to see old houses here, used to have a vertical tongue and groove on some of their doors.
Yes.
They used to have Dutch doors. Well, our doors are going to look like that, but
But it's not going to be cedar.
it's not going to be cedar, but they're going to be maintenance free.
Okay.
So we're going to get many years out because we're within, 30 yards of the open ocean,
Yeah.
which would just eat the place up.
Yes.
So we are going to use these doors. Are going to have vertical wood. They're going to have the Z on the inside, the Z for reinforcing. They're going to look like they're wood, but they're actually going to be plastic wood that we don't have to. We can just take a hose. We can wash them down. We can clean them, and we don't have to worry. But it gives that old look. And actually, one little thing that we haven't talked to a lot of folks about here is we're looking to take the front door and the back door from the kitchen for ventilation. So if we're having a light, and make them into Dutch doors. The split door,
Yeah.
but use the back door off to where we're going to have the kitchen and put a shelf on it. So if we're doing stuff and you're camping outside and you're coming to get stuff, it'll be a shelf on the inside of the door. The door can be closed so that people can pass stuff to them. So we have to do a lot of thinking, and you do thoughts of this stuff when you're doing renovations, and you try to think forward of what's going to be functional and the ability for functioning to the long term for you.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this information with me.
As we have just heard from Mr. Woodings on his renovation efforts about balancing old and new styles, we now turn to the architectural future of Bermuda. I was fortunate enough to sit down with Mr. John Woolridge, the music teacher of the Berkeley Institute, who, despite his musical background, has some very unique information about how the water system at Berkeley works. It is a very different system than the traditional water system in Bermuda. So I thought it would be a nice little spin to put this into this documentary, as it is very interesting.
Good morning. My name is Mr. Woolridge. I am the music teacher at the Berkeley Institute. I also teach video arts. Well, I was asked as a part of Berkeley's accreditation for the school system. I was asked to create a video of the school, and so I had the opportunity, wonderful opportunity, to visit every aspect of the school. That being, I went through all of the classrooms, and then I went into some of the background of the school in terms of its physical structure. And one of the wonderful things that was told me was how the water system works, how the hot water system works. Rather than it being hot water supplying one faucet with the hot water tank right by it, it in fact sent water around the whole school in a loop, so that wherever you turn the water on, it would then have hot water. So the cycle would begin where it's pushing that hot water out. Now, as it's traveling, the water can actually start to cool down, so it has to arrive back again at the water heater and send it around. This is just hundreds of square feet of footage. This pipe is making its way around the school so that every bathroom facility would have access to hot water.
To wrap up, this documentary has taken us through the journey of Bermudian architecture and infrastructure, from the early days to the modern innovations shaping our community today. We've explored how our water systems, cesspits, and building practices have evolved, showing the resilience and creativity of Bermudians in adapting to our environment. As we look back on our history and forward to a more sustainable future, it is clear that preserving these traditions is vital to maintaining our unique heritage. Ultimately, the story of Bermuda's built environment isn't just about the past. It's a foundation that will continue to impact generations to come.